Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John with Murder by the Book, and we are so excited to have Chris Mooney with us tonight to talk about his newest release, Blood World, and he's going to be chatting with Gregg Hurwitz. So real quick, let me get them introduced so we can start their chat. Hailed as one of the best thriller writers working today by Lee Child and a wonderful writer by Michael Connelly, Chris Mooney is the international best-selling author of 12 novels, most recently The Snow Girls, and now Blood World, which just came out. His fourth book, The Missing, the first in the Darby McCormick series, was a main selection of the International Book of the Month Club and an instant bestseller in over 13 countries. The Mystery Writers Association nominated his third book, Remembering Sarah, for an Edgar Award for Best Novel. Gregg Hurwitz is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than a dozen novels, including the international bestseller Orphan X, the first in the series featuring Evan Smoke. He's also written young adult novels. He's been shortlisted for numerous literary awards, graced top 10 lists, and has been translated into 28 languages. He's also the New York Times bestselling comic book writer, having penned stories for Marvel and DC. Additionally, he has written screenplays for many major studios and written, developed, and produced television for various networks. How are you guys doing tonight?
Excellent.
So if you guys are watching live, we have signed book plates for both Gregg and Chris. So when you order books, you will get signed book plates for those. If you have questions for them, you can drop them in the Facebook comments. I'm going to be monitoring questions over there and getting them to them. So I'm going to go away and let you guys chat, and I will see you in a little bit.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, I'm very excited to be here with international best-selling award-nominated author Chris Mooney. You've been, this is a big return to the US market for you in this book, Blood World. And I remember you and I have been talking about this for a lot of years. I remember it sparked your interest, I think, in a different way. You've been talking about it. And how did it feel like a different thing in concept? Because it seemed like it was kind of renting space in your brain differently than some of the other projects that you've played around with.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it has a sci-fi quality to it, and I am not a sci-fi writer. I'm not that smart to write sci-fi. I don't have those world building skills, but I thought it'd be a really interesting hybrid to take a somewhat futuristic idea and put it in, a thriller or a crime story, which is where I'm more familiar, and that's where I really, really like to work. So it became this really cool hybrid of something that's slightly futuristic, but there's no sci-fi jargon to it. You don't need to, don't need to know any special terms or anything. It's just a straight crime story in a lot of ways.
But the world building is terrific. And I was looking at some of the reviews. I mean, I know today's the official launch day. Is that right?
Today's the official launch, yes.
Yeah. So in stores and everywhere, stores, virtual and otherwise, but the reviews have been fantastic and the world building has been a lot of a success. And I think that sometimes world building is best with people who aren't overtly hardcore science fiction geeks if you want to provide access to other people, because there's a sort of translation and familiarity you have with painting the world and building all the edges of it that gives us access, that it feels accessible. It feels like it's tinged with an otherworldliness, but in a world that we can inhabit very much. What were the hardest parts for you about figuring out the world building? Did you have to imagine your way around it in 3 dimensions differently, or?
No, I didn't. And I'm going to go back to you because you've done a lot of world building too. So I want to ask you about that. But the way I kind of approached it is, I just wanted everyone to be able to jump in. But to answer your question, it was more, I wanted the world that we have now, that everyone's familiar with, the technology that exists right now. I wanted that in place. I started playing around with like LAPD cop cars with self-driving, and they could talk into the car. And then that got very sci-fi, and it was starting to explode down different avenues that I really didn't want to go. But I just wanted it kind of rooted in what we already see, hear, and feel, what's going on right now. Well, minus the pandemic stuff, of course. But I want to ask you, because I think this is a great conversation. You've done sci-fi, you've done comics. What's your approach to world building when you're doing it? Because I think you do it very skillfully, where you don't even notice it, and that's the whole key of it.
but I appreciate that. I want to talk more about you in this book though, because I'm very excited about it. It just came out today, and so I'm going to be talking about myself at great length when the next book comes out, and I prefer to have our focus.
Okay, no problem.
So, no, but I mean, so you mentioned LAPD, right? You want to keep it that's familiar, but LAPD has a blood squad, right? So there's the added element that you've overlaid. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the blood squad for LAPD and the ways that you basically, it's almost like screenplays. I remember for a long time, screenplays had a motif until it was worn into the ground that people would say 5 minutes in the future would be the start of a screenplay, right? That was introducing something that's feels very much like our world, but we're just going to make enough changes. And I feel like you grafted this blood concept on top of the existing world while keeping all the other pieces, you know, intact enough that then you could tackle them with the skill that you've, you know, I don't want to say perfected because we never perfect writing, but that you've honed to a fine implement over the course of writing the thrillers. So tell me about how LAPD has changed and what the squad is about.
So this is how that all came into play. So the idea was simply this. In the not so distant future, 5 minutes into the future, you have these people called carriers. And all that means is that they have a gene that's constantly replenishing their blood. So they're healthier, they live longer, they look younger. And what science has found out is if you take blood from one of these carriers, and you do a full body transfusion mixed with certain chemical cocktails that are still being experimented on, you get, you know, fat melts away, you sleep better, the sex life is amazing, you look 10 years younger, there's all of these things. So going to the LAPD piece was that this stuff, what ends up happening is these young carriers start getting abducted very, very quickly, and LAPD, can't keep up. They're devoting all of these resources to missing persons, but they're blood related and we don't know. And there's these cartels that are kind of operating. It's kind of all from the ground up. And the LAPD is really rushing to catch up, which comes into they're creating this blood squad that's going to be devoted solely on what they think of these blood crimes. Because when the book opens, there's still so much that's so new, which is great because as I was writing it, I'm kind of discovering things, and that's what I bring to the reader. Like they kind of discover along with me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research that's backing this concept, right? This sort of transfusions. I remember they did a study out of Oxford that they combined an old rat with a young rat, and they swapped their blood, and the old rat started to thrive and he had cell rejuvenation, and the blood that was put in the younger rat, it started to atrophy and age. And because this was some research I'd played with in a project myself, and you blew this out into a whole kind of universe. Now, we've seen currency in future worlds before of all different types. You know, it's like cigarettes in prisons. You know, with Mad Max, we've seen water as a currency. We've seen movies about time as a currency, gold. I don't think we've ever seen blood. And so there's an element, you know, aside from in, you know, a vampire.
Right.
Right. And so what about blood did you feel like was there a metaphor for you in that about, you know, I know there's a lot of corporate overlay. There's a lot of discussion about that. And I was curious about the sort of blood sucking corporate entities and the ways that the breakdown has happened. I was wondering how you thought that having blood as a currency would change your approach to what you're trying to say about that.
It's a very deep question, Mr. Hurwitz. I would say, I mean, one of the things was that, and I'm not afraid to admit this, like when I got to go get a needle, a shot, or blood drawn, like needles just, there's something about it. I'm very phobic about it. And I can, the terrorizing thing was carrying something inside of you that was of ultimate value and having it taken against your will through surgery, or in this case, being, you know, drained. It's like you have liquid gold in your veins. And that was just one of those things. It's like you have the currency within you, and you don't want anyone to know that. And what does that look like when you're going through what's that look like if someone finds out that you're a carrier? Like, what's your life look like? Are you in the book, you're constantly being hunted. You could be going on your way to school and someone could snatch you. And that's the kind of thing I played around with. And there's also this element of, like livestock. Where are these blood farms that they're taken to? Are they put in pens and drained? Like what? Nobody knows anything. So there's that mystery element to it too. But there's something so invasive about medical stuff and needles that's
do you have a vasovagal reaction that you faint when you see a needle?
No, I don't faint, but I just,
because you're a tall guy, Mooney. It's a good distance to the floor if you crack that noggin.
Well, when I see them, it's funny when I see I've had more than one nurse say, listen, if you're going to be that guy who's going to faint, you need to tell me right now because you're 6'5" and there's no way I can lift you up after. I've never fainted or anything. It's just more of this reaction, like I don't want to look, I don't want to look, I don't want to look. And then I get a lollipop at the end and everything's okay.
That's good. So, and it has a bit of that, like in terms of the hunting motif, it's funny because all these themes thread together, like race and class. It's a lot like what the X-Men does, right? With like people who are different and how you feel different. And what if you know that you're different inside, but you have to, code switch to get along. And there's all these other elements that play with it. So before we get off the corporate thing, I was funny. I just went back and rewatched the first two Alien movies, which are great and timeless. And I was really struck anew by how much, I don't want to get off this corporate line of questioning yet, how much they set the template right away in those movies about like the big, powerful conglomerate incorporation, right? That's overseeing this. And it's a literal invasion, right? Of the bodies of the cast members. But it was really interesting how, Scott and then Cameron really painted that kind of corporate oversight as a threat. And there's a strong aspect of this with Sebastian Cain in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So what's happening is that the corporations haven't really figured out what the quote primo recipe is when you mix carrier blood with whatever chemical combination is. Sebastian Cain has figured out something, but who this guy is that he's kind of the main bad guy, but it's interesting. He's the main bad guy that you actually begin to like and feel good about as the story goes on. And in his mind, he knows the corporations are coming. He knows what's happening right now is you have the Mexican cartels and the Armenian cartels in LA that are just grabbing people and draining and dumping them, and they're treating them as cattle. He has a corporate mentality, no question, but he's
entrepreneurial. He's got like this startup freedom.
Exactly. He's like, I'm on the cutting edge. I can see the future and I can see where it's going. So, he has this code where he's like, all right, these kids from really bad homes that are carriers, they're going to get abducted anyway. I might as well be the one who does it because I'm going to treat them well. They're not going to be in pens. I'm going to give them a life. They're going to be my silent partners in this blood empire that I'm building. And I think in his mind, like he's doing humanity this big service before corporations and other entities get to them. Because right now when the book opens, it's kind of still like the Wild Wild West. But like any corporation that comes in, it's going to go, no, we got it from here and we're going to do what we want to do with it.
Well, and I think one of your trademarks has always been this sort of rounded characters. Like you don't do the cookie cutter villains. And so he has a backstory that dimensionalizes him. And without giving it away, do you want to kind of allude to it?
Without giving too much away, one of the things I'll say is I grew up in the 80s and 90s with the really bad Bond villains, that were just one dimension. They're petting a cat or, they got some other thing trait. And that's all you knew about them. Like Goldfinger. What was he like when he went home? Like, one of the things, to go back to you, one of the things that you like that I did is, let me know if I have this right, but the whole thing with Orphan X was, what is James Bond's day look like when he goes home from work, after a long day at the office? And that's kind of what I try to do with villains, which is, what are they like? What TV shows do they watch? How do they act? And
what do they do when they're not busy villaining?
right, when they're not being, quote, evil, like Dr. Evil. So it humanizes them, yes, but I think that's what, evil is. It has a human face, it has a human heart, it has human ambitions. And, I like those villains that are as well-rounded as the heroes. I think it makes the story more interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the things people don't always realize is in having an antagonist who's more rounded and human. It's funny because I think like early on in one's career, we're writing like heroes and villains. And then
Yep.
you start to graduate and realize that antagonists and protagonists, it's like the more humanly flawed and dimensionalized the protagonist is, the more relatable he or she is. And with antagonists, it's also similar. The more that you can very much relate to their position, but it's off, it's shaded wrong, right?
Right.
50% or 30% or 50%, but there's a point of entry there. And it often accrues really positively to the main character when the villain really puts them up against something significant. And so with that, I mean, you have another, I think one of the things you're known for are your very strong female leads, like Darby McCormick, obviously has been, how many books have you done with her?
I've done 7 with her.
Yeah. And she's a complicated, interesting lead who's sensitive and tough. Do you want to tell me a little bit about Ellie Batista?
Yeah, so she's definitely in that Darby McCormick vein, in the sense that, and I wanted to write about someone younger too. She's in her, mid-20s. She's very interested in the blood world. She wants to get on this unit, but they're only letting the real grizzled older detectives that skewer male. And she has something to prove to them because she knows more about the ins and outs of what's going. She's reading the chat room. She's on the dark web. She's utterly fascinated by what's happening in LA. And she wants to be on the ground floor of that. And there's something I love about that youthful passion and that youthful drive, where it's not that I have something to prove, but like, I want to do good in this world. I want to be on the right side of justice. And when you put a character like that into positions with an antagonist that is very skilled and can maneuver your main character into areas that he or she is very uncomfortable with, that to me, that's where all the storytelling happens, and that's what makes things interesting.
That's
and
great.
Going back to well-rounded villains, the reason why I love well-rounded villains is because they're unpredictable. They could be acting human and nice one moment, and maybe they're going to split, or maybe they're not. But it's interesting that unpredictability is what gives us, a lot, as you are, a lot of suspense.
Right. It's what trips us up in the cadence of a story. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So because I'm in Angelino for many years, though I'm originally from Northern California, there's specific reasons you picked LA. I'm sure, as a setting for the story, as a place where one might go to seek the fountain of youth.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how the life of the city, the perception of the city played into your thinking about this story. It's not a story that would work in Boston, right?
No, no, definitely wouldn't work in Boston. And I thought, I played with that for a little bit, but it doesn't. So LA is the most obvious reason is it's the center for all cutting edge plastic surgery. It's the town of youth. It's all of these things that we know. But the thing I love about, from someone who comes from Boston and is used to very small cities and towns, and Gregg knows because he went to school there, so he knows how small areas of Boston are, to go from that to a state that is so enormous, and you have these cities, which, from my perspective, are these mini states in a much larger state.
They're like city states.
You can you know, you can have all of these cool underground operations and doing things because it's just such, it's so massive. And you know, when you have a city that's so obsessed with youth, it was just a natural, I mean, just a natural setting for that. But there's something about, for me, being an outsider when I go to LA, and you know, it's so transient in a lot of ways, but it's the thing I always relate to. It's the perfect place to go if you want to reinvent yourself. Like, you can go there and reinvent yourself, and you can become anyone or anything you want. And it's always had that allure to me. Like, that's where people go to, like, I'm going to go do this, or I'm going to go do that. And it's, they become a different person. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
It's funny. It does seem like it's always on the forefront of the forever trending downward in age youth culture.
Yeah.
You know, I was looking at a couple older movies, and I was thinking about like Cary Grant and Humphrey Bogart, like the stars, you know, Lauren Bacall, they were adults, right? The people who had the most star quality, around whom, you know, the dream of America and Hollywood is one of our two biggest exports to the world. There was a certain age and formidability. And it's funny how it seems culturally that your book seems to kind of wrestle with this cultural trend all of a sudden, where, you know, I remember the first that everyone seems younger. The pop stars are younger. The role models are younger. The way that the social media platforms have given access to people, they can be younger to get a platform. And the age of movie stars is trending downward. And it's this very interesting sort of youthful culture that almost has an overlay, a vampiric overlay almost, because all the older people are like devouring and making money off this culture that's generated.
100%. And what you said is exactly true. It keeps, from my perspective, every year, it keeps getting younger and younger and younger and younger. So like, I don't know, TikTok, which I'm not really that familiar with, it's so young. And then you have YouTube stars who, I don't know, someone was telling me not that long ago, a kid has made a small fortune by unboxing gifts on a YouTube channel. And he makes, I don't know, somewhere in 7 figures. And it's
like, where was that job option for us?
Exactly. I would sit.
I like unboxing gifts.
And exactly. I would too.
So, okay. So I had okay. One other thing.
Sure.
What do you feel like is the central, in books, I've always found, and I don't always know it when I'm doing it, but there's some central thing I'm working out between characters. There's some central emotional arc, right? And there's this very interesting relationship between Ellie and Sebastian, right? And there's a lot of different directions that things are being torn. I was just wondering, was there some emotional knot that you were fussing with or trying to loosen within yourself with this? Because, and it's funny because, I mean, I tend to not really know what the books are about for me personally until sometimes years after I've written them, and I look back and it's clear as day. And I was just wondering if you had stuff what was the fascination with that right now, do you think?
Between those two?
Or just, is there something else that seemed to me like there was a lot of heat and life around them and their exchanges?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's what you said. You hit the nail on the head. I don't really recognize, you know, something until a few years down the road. It's usually when someone else points it out. And I'm like, oh, I never really thought about that. But then when they say it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great point.
So I'll ask you in 2022, we'll just come back. We'll hold, everyone who's watching can come back. We'll put it 2 years out and we'll come back and see what kind of clarity you've arrived at.
I can definitely tell you one thing, which is, you know, one of the things that I wrestled with is that, you know, as you know, you get older, you're like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, the clock is, it's not as infinite as I imagined in my head. And for someone like Sebastian, who has created this really cool empire in his mind and is doing this really great thing in his mind, there is this sense within him, like, this is the legacy I'm going to be known for. Nobody knows it yet, but this, like, I could go down in the history books, like, people will remember me. My name will be carried on, sort of a thing. And, you know, maybe that's him wrestling with his own mortality, but that was definitely something I thought of, where he's wrestling with that, whereas Ellie, because she's so young, is just, hey, my future is bright and
Yeah, yeah. She's on the
wonderful.
other side of it.
Yeah.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's he's more
So
with himself.
couple quick questions.
Sure.
What was the thing that was the hardest? You can give quicker answers, but like, was there some aspect that was hardest for you in the book?
World building, definitely. World building was the toughest because I didn't want to do too much and I just wanted to do enough. That was probably the biggest.
Pull a lot out in the edit? Did you
Yeah, I definitely pulled a lot out. Yeah, definitely did that. And telling two different stories, Ellie's story and Sebastian's story, and then converging them, that was tricky.
And what in this do you feel like, one thing I noticed with you in your writing is you're always stretching. You don't kind of just rest on your laurels and do the same book at the same, and I know you're always reading and engaged and thinking. What was the biggest creative stretch for you beyond world building in this? Like, what's the thing you look at and you didn't think you could pull off that you feel pleased that you did? Go ahead.
I didn't want to write. It was such a cool concept that there was this feeling of, hey, the story's going to tell itself. Let's just connect the dots and write it and be done. And, it's a page turner and all that. And it's all those things. But I wanted to do what Lehane did in Mystic River. Like, I just wanted deeper characters. I wanted to see some deeper stuff going on. And I, from a writing point of view, I wanted to get a little bit deeper into characters and kind of go off in a little different areas while still doing that page turning piece. So that was, to me, the challenge and the fun of it.
Huh. Okay. So one last question before I know Johnny's lined up, and I think there's fans and readers that have more questions.
Alrighty.
Or you were going to swing in, but I was wondering, so you've been teaching at Harvard now for a long time. How many years have you been teaching there?
It's been 20 years. Can I tell them how I got the job real quick?
Okay.
All right, just real quick. I got the job because Gregg, who's an alumni there, I went to see him speak one night. We all went to dinner, and I guess I was sitting with the director of Harvard's continuing education program, and that's how I ended up getting the job through you.
Well, not really. What happened is she read your books and loved your writing.
Well, that too, but it was like, oh yeah, I met you with Gregg signing and all of this.
So my question
that always makes me laugh.
Yeah. Well, so my question is, did you learn more? Like, so you've been really teaching. I mean, I've flirted with it here or there of like a seminar I taught, a course, or I've lectured.
Right.
But one of the things I realize is whenever I'm teaching, and I have to push the instincts about writing up into my prefrontal cortex. And all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know how to tell anyone to write dialogue. But then if I have to sit down and think about explaining it, then I'll be like, oh, I do have a whole bunch of things that I never just pushed up into consciousness. And I was wondering if you had that process happen when you teach, like you're talking about books, you're talking about your writing, you're talking about structure, and are you realizing that you know more, and then in getting it out there, starting to see and reflect on it differently and taking that into your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, when you see beginner writers, they're making the same mistakes over and over again, and it usually involves just story structure. And that's what I try to teach them is that story, you need story. You need story structure. And that's where screenwriters have an advantage over fiction writers, because they're focused on structure right at the beginning. And the dialogue and all the other stuff, that stuff you can learn in time and finesse, and that you just do it by practicing and getting some feedback and all that. But the story structure is the thing. Like, you've got to know that, otherwise you don't have a chance. And
it's great because you've introduced them to a lot of the literature that we all love, meaning us on the Facebook Live chat. I mean, you've had them read Lehane. Yep. Did you do Chandler and James M. Cain, or?
I've done a whole wide, it depends on the course. If it's suspense, I did Silence of the Lambs. I had them read Truman Capote's Miriam. I try to do a whole wide range of different stuff from different writers and different backgrounds and all of that. But the other thing too is they think what we do is easy. So I get a lot of them like, oh, you just, you throw a murder in here and you do this and you do that. And I'm like, that has nothing to do. They think that's what you need for suspense. And I'm like, no, that's not what suspense is. Suspense is you got to keep wanting to read and engage. And it's an interesting thing to see. They don't. It's the story structure comes over and over again. They don't grasp it.
Well, it's they're lucky to have you. It's been really cool to see how far you stretch with this book. And I remember because you and I had conversations when it was still sort of an inkling in your mind, and you were playing with it. And I remember this was something that you stretched for and gave and really thought about. And those tend to be the books that are the most special, is when there's something that's really different. And so, it's great. It's great having you, back in bookstores. I'm very excited. It's a fantastic book. Like I said, I was looking at some of the early reviews and they seem just overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, it's been great. So that was definitely a nice thing to see. It's been great so far. And thank you so much for doing this.
Of course. I see we have a John back.
Yeah, so we have a couple of crowd questions. Dana says she loves the moral dilemmas posed in Blood World, along with the social commentary on economics. Was all of this intentional, or was it more about the concept and the plot?
It was more about the concept and the plot. I don't write political stuff. It's just human nature. It's if, someone has this fountain of youth or a cocktail that mimics the fountain of youth, you can sell it to the highest bidder that you want. So that's nothing that's all that revolutionary, but I definitely try to stay away from politics when I write.
And Julia asks, when you were writing Blood World, which character came to you first, Ellie Battista or Sebastian Cain? She says they're both such well-developed characters.
Oh, thank you, Julia. Definitely Sebastian. I always start with the bad guy or the bad girl, the big bad, whatever you want to call it. So I definitely think about the villains first, and then I try to see, okay, how can I use, what kind of protagonist would function well against that. Like, I always think about one of my favorite movies, and I just think it's such a flawless movie, is The Dark Knight, because I loved Batman growing up. I loved the Joker growing up, but that was the first time that you have this antagonist who is exceptionally great at attacking all of Batman's greatest weaknesses. And I love seeing Batman really struggle emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all of those things. And it's just so well done. And that's kind of the model I always try to think about, like that sort of thing, that dynamic, that dance that they have. What are the stakes that are involved? Like, it's so well done.
Awesome. And Duncan asks, so should fans look forward to the film or the comic series based on Blood World first?
Probably the TV show first. There's been some talk about that, but as a comic, yeah, it would be great. I mean, the nice thing about this world is that there's so many different stories you can tell about it. So I don't know. We'll see. There's some stuff in the works. So
isn't there a clothing line, Mooney?
Blood World clothing line? Yes, absolutely.
So if you guys
get to the clothing business next.
So if you have tuned in partway through, we've been chatting with Chris Mooney about his book Blood World that just came out today. Gregg Hurwitz, who is the author of the Orphan X series, has been chatting with him. If you missed the first part of the chat, Facebook will archive it so you'll be able to catch it once the live portion ends. So Greg, I know that we have been talking about Chris's stuff, but it looks like we've got a couple people in the comments that might not be aware of you and the Orphan X series. You want to tell us a little bit about the series real quick?
Yeah, well, Chris alluded earlier to one of the twists that started it out. My character is he was taken out of a foster home at the age of 12 and trained up in a Black Books program to be an assassin with an unbelievable array of training. And these orphans were taken, these kids who nobody really wanted, so they could be used as one-time use expendable weapons. But the twist I had on it, for a lot of years, I kept writing different standalones, and I was thinking about it, was when I realized that I thought, what if the handler figure who pulled him out of the foster home loved him and was like a father figure to him? And that was sort of the complication, is that he trained him to be a killer, but the harder part was trying to keep him human. And so years later, Orphan X has left the program. He's left the government. And as Chris talked about earlier, one of the pieces of fun I have with it is we don't get to see James Bond go home or Jason Bourne have like an awkward encounter at the mail slots. And I thought, what if I could take one of these archetypal characters, and part of the process of him fighting for his humanity is that he's going to live among ordinary people in the world with you and I. So he's got this sort of bigger range. And so, you know, since he's left the program, he's got a untraceable phone. And when it rings, he answers as the nowhere man, and he helps people who have nowhere left to turn. And so he's sort of a vigilante assassin, but it's really about the development of his humanity that was at the core of it for me.
It's so good.
And so if you guys are new to Gregg's, so if you're new to Gregg's books, Orphan X is the first in the series. The most recent one, Into the Fire, came out in January, and we have signed book plates from him as well as Chris. So if you have not given him a shot, you can visit murderbooks.com and order those. It seems just incredible to me, Gregg, that you were just in the store like, I don't know, 8 months ago. It seems like it was like 400 years ago.
It's the benefit of the current cultural climate is that like either every day feels like a month, you know, or it feels like Groundhog Day that it was 4 minutes ago. So our sense of time is completely warped.
Yeah, 2020 feels so long.
So speaking of kind of 2020 and it's just craziness. So how has kind of COVID affected y'all's writing schedules? Are you still able to actually get stuff done? Are you having issues focusing?
Yeah, go ahead, Gregg.
Oh, I thought you.
Either of you, both of you. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's the, you know, in some ways the joke early on was this was the pandemic novelists have been waiting for. You know, I'm pretty social. I like, but you know, I can pull it in and just get my writing day. The house is stocked with plenty of bourbon. You know, I got a lot of books. I have 3 Rhodesian Ridgebacks. We got a puppy right before this started. And so there's a lot going on. And I've been kind of just plugged in and doing my thing. I'm a little bit scattered work-wise, but I've been able to focus and get stuff done. And so it's not been wearing on me too badly, though I know it's really hard for other people who have more of a gregarious, you know, workplace.
It hasn't, you know, it hasn't affected my work at all because I work at such a routine anyway. So I'm fortunate where I get to work from home. So it really didn't disrupt anything. But if anything, the work actually increased because all of a sudden that people were starting to work from home and, you know, various editors and stuff were like, oh, I can work from home and I'm actually more productive. And can you do this? Can you do that? So the productivity actually shot up in a lot of ways, which I know sounds odd, but I think when all the distractions are gone, you know, it kind of, for me, it allowed me to focus even more on stuff.
And so I always feel odd asking this question, especially for you, Chris, because your book literally just came out like, you know, 12 hours ago. What are you working on next?
I am working on what I think is going to be a series. The tentative title is The Nowhere Girl, and it's just a little tease. It's basically it's the FBI's most prolific profiler becomes the FBI's most wanted man, and what that story is. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
And how about you, Gregg?
I'm working on the new Orphan X. I have Prodigal Son comes out in January, and that picks up off the cliffhanger of the last book. And so I'm looking forward to that. And I have a movie in post I co-wrote with a friend of mine, Philip Eisner, over at Netflix, starring Jason Momoa. So we just got production in under the wire, which was great. And then we just sold another screenplay that is our contemporary take. No, I think a different way into a story like Seven or Silence of the Lambs. It's called Sabine. And we just set that up and are starting to put that one together.
Very cool.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us tonight. Before we wrap up, just wanted to mention again, we've been talking with Chris Mooney about his new book, Blood World, and Gregg Hurwitz has been chatting with him. He's the author of the Orphan X series. We have copies of all the authors' books in stock. We've got signed book plates to go with them. If you missed the first part of this video, you'll be able to catch it when it's done. The store is still closed for browsing at the moment, but we are doing curbside pickup, and we're starting to figure out what opening up for appointments might look like. So keep an eye out for that. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up. Tomorrow night, I'll be chatting with Keith McCafferty. We just confirmed for Independent Bookstore Day on August 29th, Stephen King and James Lee Burke are going to be chatting with each other on our YouTube channel. We're super excited about that. Last thing I'll say real quick, if you've been enjoying these, obviously the best way to support us and the authors is to purchase their books from Murder by the Book. You can do that at murderbooks.com or give us a call. We also understand with kind of everything going on, books might not be in everybody's budget. We have set up a virtual tip jar. So if you've been enjoying these, maybe you purchase the books elsewhere, you can always contribute there. So Chris, congratulations on the new book. Thanks so much for chatting with us tonight. Greg, always good to see you. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Good to see you. Chris, congratulations.
Thanks, Mr. Hurwitz.
It's a hell of a book. Congratulations. Okay.
Y'all, we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.